Now that the girls have just gotten used to people just coming to their homes early in the morning, their father is planning a homecoming ceremony. Let's see what happens in chapter 4 of Blossoms of the Savannah. Kindly subscribe, share, like, and comment. Parsemei Ole Kailo planned his homecoming ceremony meticulously. He had wanted the occasion to be remarkably memorable, preferably taking the form of the traditional Nkango Talingo. He, however, knew that having been away from Nasila for many years, he had lost touch with the cultural sensibilities of the people. To re-establish the severed links, he enlisted the help of his brother Simiren and several senior elders of the community who were the custodians of his people's culture. He was prepared to get down to the bedrock and find out at which point he lost the way. He had known that Odomongi and Orok Kiteng, the legendary twin homesteads of the founder that begot the 5 clans of the Nasila, Imolerian, Imakesen, Ilukumae, Ilasia, and Itarosero, were the cradle of the Nasila people. He not only desired to reunite with Nasila people but also needed their blessings. He had therefore dispatched people to all corners of Nasila to invite representatives of all the 5 clans to the grand party, which was going to be his re-entry point into the cultural life of his people. When he gave thought to the clans, Ole Kailo could not help but laugh silently when he recalled the stereotyped anecdotes that used to be told when he was young. They were made up by rival groups with the intention of lowering the esteem of their adversaries. He recalled with amusement that his own clan of Imelorian was said to be made up of ludicrously generous men who would slaughter a bull and foolishly share it out, all meat to others, leaving themselves without any. They would then happily and ridiculously raise up their arms to show to all the sundry that they had not hidden any meat under their armpits. But for the Imakesen clan, it was exactly the opposite. The clansmen were said to be so miserably stingy that they would deny a dog the afterbirth of a she-goat. It was said that they would opt to sleep hungry rather than share food they had in the house with a soldier who dropped in unannounced. Interestingly, Ole Kailo was a member of the supposedly generous Ilmolerian clan, and his wife Melanoi was the daughter of the close-fisted Imakesen clan. When the party was finally thrown, it was nothing short of ostentatious. And true to the Imolerian spirit and tradition, Ole Kailo held nothing back. He slaughtered a fattened ox, 6 rams, and 4 he-goats. In the living room stood 4 long tables spread with the most astounding array of food Nasila had ever seen. There were large trays laden with huge chunks of boiled meat, whose tantalizing aroma filled the room. Lamb chops grilled to a golden brown color glistered appetizingly on chopboards. Succulent pieces of pink roasted liver they arranged on leaves of oloirepirepi weed to preserve moisture and taste. Then there were other choice pieces of meat on skewers, and others wrapped up in sacred oloiren leaves that were the preserve of the elders who were to bless the home of Interlingo. It was only after such blessings that Nasila would receive back their sons who had gone out to hunt for fortunes and returned safely. The elders would also bless the wife, children, and property that he brought back, and which were all henceforth going to be the wealth of the Imolelian clan. That day had begun early for Ole Kaelo. He had left his bed at cockcrow, the time that was known in Nasila as Tolakira Lole Kasale. He was to see to it that every detail about the impending homecoming ceremony was taken care of without exception, and absolutely nothing was to be left to chance. There was little for him to do that morning, though, for all preparations and arrangements had earlier been made. Systems had been set, and all that was left to be done was to implement what had been agreed upon. Days earlier, with the help of his brother Simiren and his wives, he had gathered a retinue of young men and women from his Molelian clan and charged them with the responsibility of organizing the activities and chores of the ceremonial day. And true to their calling, the young men and women immediately swung into a variety of activities with zest. Those who belonged to the subclan of Ilorasha Kineji, to which Ole Kaelo also belonged, felt that the responsibility to have the occasion succeed rested on their shoulders. Led by a young local primary school music teacher called Joseph Pamwat, they took charge of the entire ceremony. Members of the other sub-clan of Lelema graciously accepted that the leadership of Joseph Pamwat and their other cousins, and all worked harmoniously and tirelessly to bring about the success that was already evident in the morning. From that veranda of his house, Ole Kaelo surveyed with utter satisfaction all that was happening in his homestead. He was most grateful and felt humbled by the fact that in that ancestral land to which he had finally returned and to which he belonged, body and soul, honor, brotherhood, and selflessness were still virtues. In Nakuru, only the promise of monetary payment would have induced such a large number of young men and women to turn up. With trembling lips and tears welling in his eyes, he swore under his breath that never again in his life would he ever abandon the culture of his people or live outside his clan. Imolelian, its twin subclans of Lorasha, Kineji, and Lelema would always be like two chambers of his heart that incessantly pumped the blood that sustained him. Regaining his composure, he walked back into the house. Mama Milanor was at the tables ensuring that the trays that came out of the kitchen, laden with meat delicacies, were sorted out and arranged appropriately. Tayo was busy slicing chunks of oxtonji into manageable pieces, a job she said she did with dexterous fingers When their father opened the door to let himself into the living room, Virgin was busy transferring glasses from the sideboard onto a nearby table. The moment she saw him enter, her fingers became clumsy and she nearly dropped a glass. "Would you ever do anything right, child?" Her father reprimanded her severely. "I hope you have not broken any glasses this morning." "I'm terribly sorry, Papa," Regine said remorsefully, her eyes downcast. "But I've not broken any." But sensing that her father's eyes were still upon her, she became more nervous. Just then, her braided hair fell free of their pins and covered her face. She tried to tuck a strand behind her ear, but in the process lost the grip of the two glasses, dropping them on the floor. Her father winced, grimaced, and struggled to control his temper. That was not a day to get angry, but all the same, he wondered where in the world they fetched that awkward, overblown, stupid child. Her restlessness appalled him, and the very look in her eyes, half fearful, half defiant, and wholly troubled, was always enough to raise his temper to the highest pitch. He clicked his tongue irritably and quickly left the room. At noon, Ole Kailo's spacious homestead was nearly full to capacity. There was pomp all over, and carnival atmosphere resonated with the song and dance hung in the air. A bevy of beautiful young women stepped forward, their necks bedecked their layer after layer of exquisite multicolored bead ornaments. The bright-colored lassos they wore over their shoulders fluttered in the windy afternoon air as they moved sedately, heads poised, chests heaving forwards and backwards, knees bobbing, voices raised melodiously as they glided smoothly into an exciting traditional dance. Two young men out of the group of about 20 began to sing in their light melodic voices. The rest joined in, their deep guttural voices mingling with those of the young women. The moment the voices mingled and fast, the dance changed subtly. The men's group broke into two, each with a light, springy jump. They skipped away as they skirted the compound and joined again into one group amid shrieks of excitement. The young women repeated their dance, their light steps sedate, their backs and shoulders held straight and their heads haughty and graceful. And as they sang, the young men leaped to the center. They jumped high into the air, each one of them vying to outdo the other. Tayo and Rejan, who had just joined the throng of spectators, were ecstatic. Their eyes were glued to the handsome, arrogant, athletic figure of the Morans. One particular young man caught Tayo's eye. He was lithe, tall and dark-haired, in red shoe calz, who leaped higher with more grace than the rest. She involuntarily gasped, her gaze still riveted upon his handsome face. "Look at that young man," Tayo told her sister, excitedly pointing at him. "Isn't he handsome?" Version followed her sister's gaze. Yes, he is, she said, trying to scrutinize his face from the distance. He is undoubtedly good looking. Even as they gazed at the young man, he broke out of the group and walked out of the gate. Moments later, he came back leading a group of uniformed school children, boys and girls who he quickly arranged into four short lines, one following the other. Soon, the air was resonant with their vibrant voices as they sang an exciting, heart-lifting song, whose words had been carefully selected to commemorate Ole Kailo's return. The song was sung, and then the children broke into a quick, exciting dance. The boys formed a semicircle, the girls formed a line. They wove into an intricate pattern, hands touching and dropping, their eyes demurely downcast. The boys chanted and sang a refrain, while the girls moved with grace that brought instant applaud from all those present, their tiny steps gliding smoothly like ducks upon water. Then the boys changed their dance style. They leaped one by one into the center of the circle they had formed, and amidst shrieks and chants, jumped high in the air while whirring, spinning, and clicking their heels. The girls responded by singing a melodious praise song. As they sang, they gyrated their hips, creating a certain ripping movement of their abdomens that was seductive and pleasant to watch. From the children's performance, it was evident that the cherished Nasila tradition dance would stand the test of time. Those in the compound came closer to watch. Several began to clap in time to the music as the tempo of the girls' gyrations speeded up. Tayo was stupefied. She clapped until her hands hurt, and all along she was lost in thought. The sight of those young school children singing and dancing so joyfully brought back the memories of her high school days. Her heart warmed up when she recalled the numerous occasions when she excelled in music festivals and was awarded and garlanded. Broadcasting stations recognized her talent and encouraged her to take music as a career. She had taken for granted that her parents, who on several occasions applauded her when she won trophies on account of her performance, would not have any objection if she pursued the desire of her heart as her future career. An EM radio station that had for a long time followed her music development keenly offered her a chance to discover and explore the worth of her talent by sponsoring her to attend a music extravaganza in Mombasa. Thereafter, she was to attend a short course after which her abilities were to be guarded. When she broke the news, which she thought would delight her parents, her father was furious. He curtly refused to grant her permission and angrily disallowed any further discussion on the matter, effectively crushing any hopes she may have developed of making music her career. He stated categorically that no daughter of Ole Kaelo would so demean herself and her family as to perform in the public in exchange of monetary gain. It was one thing to perform in a school festival, he reasoned, but to perform to a public gallery was one short step to outlawry. No amount of persuasion would exchange her father's mind. She knew without any doubt in her heart that she still loved music. It was in her blood. How she wished she would meet that young man who coached those young children to sing and perform so well. It was not until 3 in the afternoon that the carnival mood had been getting merrier by the hour, exploded into a phrased celebration. The exuberant crowd in the homestead broke into an exciting rhythm of a song and dance. Tayo and Renshan, who by then had retreated into the shadow of a spreading oloponi tree, from where they watched the colorful movement of the throng of dancers, could not resist the urge to join them. They quickly stepped into the crowd and began to dance, and so did their mother, who, tagging their aunt Yaiyo Botar, also joined other dancers who were already heaving their chests forward and backwards as they chanted the refrain. Before long, they spotted their 3 other aunties, who too were amongst the crowd of dancers. Uncle Simiren was there too, dancing, his bald head shining like a piece of iron sheet in the afternoon sun. Then they saw their father. "Look at Papai," Tayo said, giggling as she pointed out their father amidst a group of dancing elders. "He doesn't seem to know how to dance," commented Regine jokingly, and then added mischievously, "He should ask Uncle Simiren to coach him." They laughed heartily, hiding their faces behind other dancers so that they did not come face to face with him, lest they embarrassed him. Just then, a shadowy figure appeared and swiftly walked past them. They simultaneously looked up and saw a man stare piercingly at them. He sneered at them contemptuously, then quickly walked past the dancers and disappeared out of the gate. But that was not before they positively recognized him as the young man who accosted them on their first day in Nasila. They were shocked, and suddenly all the happiness and serenity that had pervaded their hearts dissipated. They now felt angry, terrified, and isolated, even when they were in the midst of the happy throng of revelers that were obviously of what had befallen them. It was at 5 o'clock when Simiren charmingly invited all those present to savour his brother's lavish hospitality. The elders and their wives were ushered into Olekailo's spacious living room, while the young men, young women, and the children mingled happily in the lush, sprawling, well-talented lawn. Soon, the ever-dutiful daughters of Imolen clan moved to and fro among the chattering throng with trays heavily laden with pieces of meat that the revelers ate ravenously to their fill. When beverages had been distributed all round and everyone had had their share, the young people departed, having acknowledged that a true descendant of Imolan had finally arrived and taken his rightful position in the clan. At 7 o'clock in the evening, after the lights had been put on and the traditional Esuguroi drink had been served in generous measures, tongues loosened and hearts gladdened. Soon after, the party gathered momentum and voices rose. With no time, one could hardly be heard over the hubbub of talk and laughter, and as the pleasurable and lively celebration progressed, voices became animated, hands and arms gesticulated, vigorously while heads turned more often. Eyes searched out acquaintances with a throng of revealers, and it was all pomp and gaiety as ivory adorned and bejeweled fingers fluttered. Their shoulders gleamed in the light, multicolored bead ornaments glittered upon elaborated bead-gilded necks. Pendulos of all colors dangled loosely down extended earlobes, and the bright colors of lassos, kangas, red shukas, and multicolored blankets all turned the Olekaila living room into a kaleidoscope of shifting light and color. That evening, Mama Milanoy, the perfect hostess, was a woman with glamour. She was representantly dressed in purple silk and moved happily from one group to the other, talking cheerfully, her laughter ringing out pleasantly. That was her home and that was her evening. She had to make sure that no one present in that living room would leave with any shred of doubt in his or her heart as to who was the Inapen Nkang of the Lekailo homestead. Tayo was watching with amusement as the mother moved from one group of revelers to another when suddenly her eyes caught sight of a tall man who was advancing across the room towards her direction. She recognized him and her heart missed a beat. Momentarily, his bright eyes met hers. They were perfectly set on a young and handsome face that was above an equally impressive attire of red shukas. Across the room, maternal instincts directed Mama Milanoy to look at the direction of her daughter. Tayo, in time to see two events happening simultaneously. A handsome young man striding towards her daughter and her husband sending a seemingly corrosive glance in the direction of his daughter. One can never tell with Ole Kaelo. Mama Milanoy thought aloud. He can be the most dreadful spoiled sport. Ole Kaelo, however, did not interfere and Mama Milanoy watched from across the room, smiling a little, as the two young people met. How lovely Taylor looked that night. She thought she was her very image when she was at her age. She watched the two as they exchanged greetings and their smiles as their eyes met. Then he seemed to ask her a question and she, with downcast eyes, gave him a demure smile. For a moment, Mama Milanoy stood there allowing a ridiculous small blade of envy cut through her heart. She let her heart wander and wondered what might have happened that she met a handsome young man such as the one her daughter was speaking with, fallen in love and got married. If she had had such an opportunity, what might her life have been? Maybe she would not have been joined at the hip with the bully like, do you know that young man your daughter is talking to? It was her brother-in-law Simran standing beside her. She needs to be informed immediately. Is he a bad boy? Mama Milanoy asked urgently, fearing for her daughter. Far from this, Simiren answered reassuringly. In fact, he is one of the finest and dependable young men that we have in Nasila. What's Tayo to be informed about him then? Mama Milanoy asked puzzled, or is he married and has a vicious wife? You are wrong again, Simiren said smilingly. It is simply this. The young man whose name is Joseph Pamwat is a brother to your daughter. Pamwat, his father, is of the clan of Imolarian of Iloshaka Kineji subclan, like ourselves. It is therefore not only a great abomination if we were to allow that ignorance to discredit Nasida cultural values, but that illicit contact would be a taboo that is bound to have untold consequences on us all. From the corner where they stood watching the noisy events in the living room, Berjan saw the meeting of her sister and the lithe young man who he had earlier in the day said was handsome. For some strange reason, she felt alarmed. Was it jealousy consuming her? But why would she be jealous of her sister? No, it was not jealousy. It was fear. It was the fear of losing Tayo. Tayo was hers. She was her only sister, her only friend, and her only ally. She could not dare lose her or share her love with anybody. Never. When she gave thought to the possibility, her young heart nearly stopped beating. For a brief, almost frightening moment, she allowed the negative emotions take the better of her. She swore she would hate anyone who came between her and her sister. Tayo saw her sister come and she thought how timely her arrival was, for she had wanted to share that moment of joy and ecstasy with someone close to her. She smiled dazzlingly as she introduced the two to each other. Berjan was rewarded by a twinkle in the young man's eye as he shook her delicate soft hands. There followed a brief, slightly awkward silence. Around them, the talk and the laughter of the revelers rose and felt like the sound of waves beating upon flooded river banks. Before they had time to say another word, Uncle Simiren and their mother stood beside them. It chagrined Tayo greatly to be told of her clan's relations with the young man she had just met. Then the time finally came. It was the time to formally receive Pasmei Olekail and his family back into the Himalayan fold and into the large family of the Nasila people, and offer blessings for his family well-being. To conduct the sacred ceremony was an old man who had been sitting in the company of other two old men at a corner of the living room. He was sagging with wrinkles. His lips had collapsed on his toothless gums, while his scalp showed patches of white skin through his thin grey hair. Earlier in the evening, Tayo had looked at the old man with piteous face as he sat with his elbows on the table, holding a joint of mutton with both hands and trying to gnaw on it. Seeing how much he struggled, obviously with very little success, she had sympathized with him. She had gone into the kitchen, fetched a plateful of rice, peas, beans, and potatoes and handed it to him. The old man received the food with gratitude, while the other two elders eyed him with envy. "Thank you very much, my dear child," the old man had said, and then asked curiously, "May I know whose daughter you are, my child?" "I'm Ole Kailo's daughter," answered Tayo impatiently, not wanting to prolong the discussion with the decrepit old man. Later, Tayo was surprised to see that the seemingly helpless and toothless old man was one of the most revered elders in the community. She saw him get up from where he sat with the other two old men and leaning heavily on his walking stick, moved to the center of the living room. His pace was dignified as he walked with his chin up and his mouth set in a hard straight line. That was the time that Tayo observed his heavily wrinkled face. There was a haughty set to his features. For a moment, Tayo felt as if he had fastened his eyes on her and that his gaze was like a physically oppressive force upon her. She suddenly felt much in awe of him. When he began to speak, his voice boomed and its resonance filled the crowded room. He introduced himself as Old Ole Musanka, a member of the Imakesen clan and of Iterito Etset. He said Nasila was a Ma house and anybody born of Ma was entitled to its shelter. Ma culture was the blood and marrow that gave sustenance to the body, and the body was the collective masses of Ma. Ole Kaelo, he said, was a tiny strand of hair that had been blown away from its owner's head by a gust of wind. The same wind that had blown it away had blown the strand back into its owner's head. He said the head could not refuse to receive back the returning strand, but the onus was upon the strand to attach and coil itself back onto the rest of the hair on the head and blend with it. If it did not, he warned, it would drop and get trampled upon in the ground. He advised Ole Kailo to re-assimilate himself into his people's culture. Those of us who have been listening to the sound of our cattle bells, he said, quoting the children's song, know that the Ole Kailo's cattle are homebound. They are bound to come, for the founder said, when a rat begins to smell, it returns to its mother's home. And home is never far from one who is still alive, one of the elders interjected. And speaking of home, Ole Musanka said candidly, Ole Kailo must be told home is not his house, however magnificent it may be. Home is Ma, home is Nasila, home is family, and home is the children. Kill one of the four pillars, and there is no home to speak about. Sever yourself from the culture of your people, and you effectively become Olikirokoi, a man of no fixed abode. Your elegant house notwithstanding. Where are the women of Ma? Embrace the wife and children of Ole Kailo and bring them back into the Nasida fold. Where are the elders of Imolarian? There is your man. Cut him loose from the snares of the alien cultures. I'm through. Then he had a parting shot for Tayo and Rachel. Do not listen to crusaders of an alien culture that is being perpetrated by a certain entangler called a Makerere. The WASP advocates that we maintain Intoye Mengelana amongst our daughters. Taba, may she go down with the setting sun. After that, Vadiabokas, the old man blessed the Olekailos. He had a special blessing for the daughters of Olekailo who served him with a special dish that evening. He prophesied that she will be a mother of the next leader of Nasila and Ma. When Pastor May Olekaido later learned that the daughter mentioned that the seer was Tayo, he was elated. But Mama Milanoi was troubled. What she feared for her daughters was turning to be real Tayo, and Reshen also felt troubled. They felt squeamished as they stood there, their downcast eyes riveted upon the floor, fear and hopelessness tormenting their young hearts. But who was that person? They wondered, who was referred to as a worship, and who evoked so much virulent hatred amongst the people of Nasila. Thank you guys for listening. Subscribe, share, like, comment. See you in chapter 5.